Greetings and welcome to Chained Opinion.
Glad to be here.
Today we're diving into a really important topic, the upcoming full enforcement of the REAL-ID Act here in the United States.
Yes, it's definitely something folks need to be aware of.
Our goal is, well, to give you a clear picture what REAL-ID actually is, why it's being fully enforced now, who it affects, and maybe what steps you might need to take.
And that key date is coming up.
Right, May 7th, 2025. That's when these rules really kick in fully.
Indeed. Lots of questions around it, so it's good we're digging in.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What exactly is the REAL-ID Act, fundamentally?
Okay, so fundamentally, the REAL-ID Act is a federal law. It was passed way back in 2005.
2005, wow, okay.
Yeah, it came about directly from recommendations made by the 9/11 Commission. You know, after the attacks, they looked into security vulnerabilities.
Okay, so it has roots in post-9/11 security thinking.
Precisely. A key thing they recommended was setting minimum security standards for state-issued IDs, like driver's licenses and ID cards.
So it's about making IDs more secure across the board, standardizing things.
That's the core idea, to create a more standardized and secure form of ID for specific federal purposes.
Yeah.
The aim is really to make fraudulent IDs much harder to create and use.
Enhancing national security by making identity verification more reliable.
Exactly. That's the goal.
Makes sense. Now, probably the most practical question for listeners. How do I know if my current license or ID is already REAL-ID compliant? Is there something specific to look for?
Yes, absolutely. There's a visual indicator, usually pretty easy to spot.
Okay.
You need to look for a star marking. It's typically in the upper right-hand corner of the card. It might be gold, black, or sometimes it's an outline.
Ah, the star. I think I've seen that. So if my ID has that star.
Then you're all set. If you see that star, your ID is already REAL-ID compliant. No further action needed on your part for this specific requirement.
That's good news for anyone who already has it. A relief, I'm sure.
Definitely simplifies things for them.
But for those who check and don't see the star, what happens come May 7th, 2025? What are the actual consequences?
Right, that May 7th, 2025 date is the critical one. From that day forward, a standard non-real ID license or state ID won't be accepted for certain federal uses.
Okay, like what specifically?
The big one everyone talks about is flying. You won't be able to use it to board federally regulated commercial airplanes for domestic flights.
Wow, okay. So domestic air travel is a major impact. No star, no flying with just that ID.
That's the rule starting May 7th, 2025. You'll need a real ID or another acceptable form.
What else?
It also affects access to certain federal government facilities, like secure federal buildings, and also entering military bases. You need compliant ID for that, too. And even accessing nuclear power plants falls under this.
So it's not just airports, it's federal buildings, military installations, quite a few areas.
It covers several key secure locations and functions, yes.
Which really highlights the need for either getting that real ID or knowing the alternatives. What are the acceptable alternatives if someone doesn't have a real ID license by the deadline?
Good question. There are definitely other documents that will still work. The most common one people might have is a valid U.S. passport.
Okay, a passport works.
Yes, a passport book or even a U.S. passport card. Also, military IDs are acceptable.
Right.
Permanent resident cards or green cards will also be accepted. And then there are other federally approved documents like DHS Trusted Traveler cards, Global Entry, XEs, Sentry, those sorts of things.
TSA pre-check cards, too.
Yes, those are included in the Trusted Traveler programs. The TSA website actually has a full list, which is helpful.
So just to be clear, if I have a valid passport, I can still fly domestically after May 7th, 2025, even if my driver's license doesn't have the star.
Correct. A valid U.S. passport is perfectly acceptable for domestic flights and accessing those federal facilities we mentioned, regardless of your driver's license status.
Okay, that's a key point. But let's say someone doesn't have a passport, realizes their ID isn't compliant, and they do need to fly or access these places. How do they actually get a real ID? What's the process like?
The general process involves going in person to your state's driver's licensing agency.
The DMV, or whatever it's called in your state?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It might be the DMV, the DOL, MVA. The name varies. And this is really important. The specific requirements and the exact steps can differ quite a bit from state to state.
Ah, so it's not one single national process. You have to check locally.
Absolutely critical. Check with your state's agency. However, most states require a fairly standard set of documents.
Like what typically?
You'll almost always need proof of identity. This usually means an original or certified copy like a U.S. birth certificate, a valid U.S. passport, or maybe a permanent resident card.
Okay, proof of who you are.
Then proof of your Social Security number. Your Social Security card self-works, or sometimes a W-2 form or a pay stub showing the full number.
Got it. SSN proof.
And third, proof of residency in that state. Usually 2 documents are needed for this.
2 proofs, okay?
Yes, things like a current lease agreement, a mortgage statement, utility bills, bank statements, something with your current address. And you'll also generally need documents proving your lawful status in the U.S.
That sounds like quite a bit of paperwork to pull together.
It can be. That's why planning ahead is so important. Don't wait until the last minute.
Absolutely. So the best advice is?
Definitely visit the official website for your specific state's licensing agency. Search for REALID on their site. They'll list exactly what documents they require, the fees, and the steps. Many even let you start the application online.
Check your state's website first. Crucial step. Okay, so we know what it is, how to get one, the alternatives. But why the big push now? You said the law is from 2005. Why is full enforcement happening in 2025 after all these delays?
That's a fair question. The enforcement has been postponed multiple times over the years. Various reasons cited, state readiness, the pandemic more recently.
Right, I remember hearing about delays.
But now it seems the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and the TSA are quite firm on this May 7th, 2025 deadline.
And what's their reasoning for the firmness now? What's changed?
Well, based on statements from DHS and TSA, a primary argument continues to be security. They emphasize that the security standards for REALID make these documents much harder to fake.
Okay, so the anti-counterfeiting aspect is key.
Very much so. They see it as closing security gaps. There's also been stated concern, particularly referenced in relation to a memo reported by Fox News Digital, about preventing individuals potentially in the country unlawfully from using non-compliant IDs, perhaps from sanctuary cities, to board domestic flights.
Okay, so that's part of the stated rationale, too.
Yes, the memo quote was along the lines of, DHS and TSA are clear the only place an illegal alien should be flying is home. So that perspective is out there as part of the justification for strict enforcement now.
Right, reporting that perspective from the source. And it links back to the original 9/11 Commission goal of preventing potential threats.
Exactly. The argument is about closing gaping vulnerabilities, as they put it, to prevent criminals or potential terrorists from exploiting the system, referencing the way the 9/11 hijackers obtained IDs. It's presented as a necessary security upgrade.
I see. It seems like a convergence of security arguments. Are most people already compliant, though? Is there data on that?
Yeah, the TSA does track this. As of fairly recently, I think around April 2025 statistics, something like 81% of travelers passing through TSA checkpoints were already presenting an acceptable ID, which includes real IDs or those other alternatives like passports.
81%, so a large majority, but still leaves a significant chunk of people who might face issues.
Precisely. And for those travelers who show up after the deadline with only a non-compliant ID and no acceptable alternative, well, they can expect problems.
Like what kind of problem?
Delays, almost certainly.
Yeah.
They'll likely face additional screening procedures, and ultimately they could be denied access to the security checkpoint altogether, meaning denied boarding.
So potentially missing your flight entirely?
It's a real possibility if you don't have the right ID.
Okay. Looking beyond just flights and federal buildings for a moment, what are the broader implications here? Is Real ID likely to become sort of the default ID for more things down the line?
It seems likely that real ID compliance will become increasingly important, yes. While the immediate impact is focused on those specific federal purposes we've discussed.
Air travel, federal sites.
Yeah, right. The push towards a standardized, more secure ID suggests it could become a requirement for accessing a wider range of federal services or benefits in the future. That's speculation, but it fits the trend.
So getting a real ID or having that passport is becoming more of a baseline necessity for interacting with the federal government in secure contexts.
That seems to be the direction, yes. A standard driver's license will still work for driving, probably many state things, but its federal utility is definitely shrinking after May 7th, 2025.
Well, this has been incredibly clarifying. Thank you. So just to quickly summarize for everyone listening, the big deadline is May 7th, 2025.
Check your license for the star.
Exactly. Check for the star. If it's not there and you plan to fly domestically or need to access those federal sites, you need to act.
Either get the real ID from your state, check their website now for requirements, or make sure you have an acceptable alternative, like that valid U.S. passport.
It really feels like a significant step in standardizing identification for security reasons, something we all need to be ready for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A little preparation now can save a lot of hassle later.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks again for breaking all that down.
My pleasure.
And for all of you listening, we really hope this was helpful. Please do share this information if you know someone who might need it. Subscribe to Chained Opinion for more analyses like this one, and feel free to leave us your comments or questions.
We appreciate the engagement.
You can find Chained Opinion as an audio podcast on YouTube Music and also on Spotify. Thanks so much for tuning in today.
Thank you.